it wasn't I want to drink, it was I need to drink. That's how I thought, right? And when you think that way, it drives the desire. Thoughts create feelings. That's how I talk with people all the time. Your thoughts create your feelings. So if you are thinking, I need, well, guess what? You're going to feel a lot of desire. And so we have to change that thought. The first step was like me realizing like that thought came through very clear, like I need a beer. I remembered it. I was like, after I'd first started doing this work and I was at work, I used to have a long commute home and it was a long day. It was like in Oregon, winter, dark, rainy, got in the car. And like my first thought was, I need a beer. And I caught myself in that moment and was like, oh, wow. Like there, I could feel it. Like I said, I need a beer. And immediately I like want, like I could feel the desire. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. Like my literal thought was, I need. Well, I don't need one. I want one. There's a difference between needing and wanting.
Welcome, everybody. It's Katie Lane with Thrive Alcohol Recovery. And today I have with me Molly Watts, who is a special guest. I had you on, man, was it like 4 years ago now or something, Molly?
Probably like four. I think that sounds about right, Katie.
Okay. Well, I'm excited to talk with you. Molly is a podcaster in the alcohol recovery space, also an author, and you also work with individuals and groups in your kind of area of expertise, which I think is very applicable to TSM because, I mean, from my understanding, and I want to hear it from you, you really use mindfulness techniques, habit change techniques, awareness techniques to help people drink less alcohol. Is that right?
Absolutely. And I think that that is a big, uh, just defining comment about it, right? Because one of the things that I find to be a kind of a mindset about alcohol that people hold on to is that we're in recovery and we treat it somehow differently than other habits that don't serve us, as opposed to just thinking that the way that we include alcohol in our lives is like other things that we would, that we would be mindful about or that we would make a plan around. And, my work has been helping people understand that, yeah, this is actually something that you can apply to alcohol and not just look at it as something that is separate and needs its own strategy that's different.
Yeah. That's what I love so much about your work is it just lifts this like weight and stigma that comes with problem drinking. And I feel like as a society, we view it as black and white. You're either an alcoholic or you're not. And there's so many Americans I saw from the CDC that 1 in 3 Americans drink excessively. And so it's like so many people are in that place of, I guess, what you might call gray area drinking. And I know I hear from people all the time. I imagine you do as well. They're like, I thought AA was the only option. I thought I had to go to rehab. I thought I had to quit drinking forever. But there's this, newer conversation, I mean, around the Sinclair method, around what you're doing to let people know, like, hey, there are other options and your brain is actually more powerful than you give it credit for. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And I think that I don't know about you, but I'm just like in 2025, like I'm still surprised. Like but I hear it all the time too. Like I just only know about AA. And it's like,
yeah.
wait, like that is like the oldest, right? And I get it. I mean, it's been around the longest, but it's like the least scientifically proven. And it has no basis in science at all. So I get like, wow, just wow, that this is still the way. And even with what has happened in the last, I would say maybe post-pandemic, that this whole sober curious kind of conversation that's really happened, it still focuses really very strongly on sobriety versus drinking, right? And
Yeah.
like there's still very one, I mean, it's either like you have a problem or you're sober. And there's literally like there's nobody that seems to want to talk about like the ability to include alcohol, or at least, well, that's not true. There are other people, but I know for myself, I have always come at it from the notion of if we're going to include alcohol in our lives, let's go about it in a low risk, mindful, and with our eyes wide open as to what it is that we are actually choosing when we choose to drink. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So before we jump into kind of the work you do and your technique and your approach, I want to start with your story. I know on our last podcast you talked about it a bit, but for those who haven't seen that since it was so long
Yeah.
ago,
Yeah.
how did you
And they
get
don't
into
want to go
this?
back in there and find it.
Yeah. How did you get into this work? I know you have your own personal history with alcohol and you had, yeah, just tell us how you got into this work.
Yeah, so I really was a daily habit drinker. But I also come at it from the perspective of being an adult child of an alcoholic. And really that was the kind of the joining those two perspectives that led me down this path. For many, many years, I separated my own drinking from problematic drinking or from alcoholic drinking because I had a very clear image of what I thought, alcoholism was. And that was really from my mom, because it wasn't just my growing up years. My mom actually passed away as the result of an alcoholic binge at the age of 81, which is almost unheard of. I mean, she went through rehab 4 different times, including the last time when she was 77 years old, which again is almost unheard of. Most people either A, don't live that long to go through rehab if they are really, if they drink a lot, or they don't, they just can't find the motivation to do it at the age of 77. It was a 9-month inpatient residential treatment program. So when she came out, she was clearly no longer physically dependent on alcohol, but she had never managed to overcome that psychological dependence. And she drank 3 weeks after she got out, which was really, hard for our whole family. And that really kind of precipitated just a slow, a decline from those last 4 years where she really just couldn't cope. And so it that and even then when she passed away, that didn't that didn't necessarily like launch me into a change with my own lifestyle. Like I said, for many years I just kept what she did as completely separate from how I used alcohol. And I refused or didn't want to or didn't choose to see how my own drinking was problematic. Um, I was one of those people who, didn't drink to like I didn't like to get necessarily drunk. I didn't like to get altered. So I would drink, but I was drinking, 3 to 4 to 5 drinks a night on just a regular, I call them school nights because they were weeknights and my kids were young, as opposed to the weekends where I would drink maybe, 5, 6, 7 drinks on a weekend night, right? I had no knowledge, no understanding of the fact that that I was actually a heavy drinker, that I was well beyond the low risk. I didn't, I would have told you, like, I would have said I was a moderate drinker. Like, that's how I saw things. And it wasn't until the early part of 2019 that I had been working on another podcast and another whole project and got introduced to a life coach and really started to understand, like, I was working on all these really positive things in my life, but there was this one habit that I had that really just, it weighed me down emotionally because I thought about it all the time. Like, I was worried about, the example that I was setting for my kids, that I was going to turn into my mother. That, I mean, I had a lot of unconscious, and I also at the same time believed that I was like genetically predisposed to desiring alcohol more. So I felt stuck, like there was just no hope for me to ever not change this daily drinking habit. And in 2019, I just decided to use this approach that I now call the behavior map result cycle, this self-coaching model, to work on how I thought about my drinking, how I thought about my life. And I just applied that, and with tactical steps, I met myself where I'm at, which is kind of the way that I work with people, and started to reduce over time. And I talk about meeting yourself where you're at, creating a doable plan. I was not like in the beginning, like if you would have told me like you have to take 30 days off, I would have been like, no, haven't done that since like, 1999 when my was pregnant, like not going to do it. So I would have, or can't do it. Right. That's how I would have thought. I would have can't do that. So I just created steps and strategies, and I kept reducing and kept working on how I thought about it, kept thinking, really becoming a better, I say all the time, becoming a better thinker, a better mind manager, so that I didn't feel like I needed to escape my life all the time, which I think is the way that I would have told you. I felt like I had to drink to relax and unwind. And I started to figure out that that wasn't actually true. I did a lot of research on the science of it. And so then by the end of 2019, I really had completely changed my relationship with alcohol, and was able to, I don't was able to not drink on a daily basis, but still then if I wanted to go have a beer or two on a weekend, I really educated myself on those low risk limits, and I've been able to stick to those. And it's now what, 2025, so 6 years later. So yeah.
That's so cool and just empowering. And when you said like talking about how you felt stuck, I feel like as a society and a collective, we've kind of been trained to think about alcohol addiction, like we were saying, this black or white thing. And so once we're in that pit of drinking too much and not feeling happy with it, there's almost like this unconscious belief that we're never going to be able to get out of this, or there's no possibility of moderate drinking. I see that comment all the time. Like, once you're an alcoholic or a problem drinker, like you can't go back. And I mean, I really personally struggled with moderate drinking myself, but I didn't approach it in the way that you teach about it. It was just like, okay, like let's white knuckle it, let's count drinks, not like let me change my beliefs and my thinking around alcohol. So I find your approach so fascinating and empowering for the individual, just to give them an option that, they're not stuck, especially for people like you. I mean, I certainly would have considered myself, a moderate drinker as well, had I been drinking that amount. You're not destroying your life necessarily, but I'm sure it was having
Right. I
some
mean,
consequences.
right. I mean, I was a successful, I worked, I had kids, I was doing it, doing life, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, from the outside, and I felt like other people around me were doing the same thing, we're drinking similarly. And it isn't that, I mean, and so to that end, like, but what I found is like, and what I did through a lot of research and a lot of understanding, like I said, I'm big into the science side of it. So for me, and because that science for me helped me change my thinking. Right. So I had this story, this narrative that I needed to drink to relax and unwind. And then what I learned was that my daily drinking, the amount of alcohol that I was consuming was actually creating a neurochemical in the neurotransmitters. I won't get too technical, but basically if you think about this, the brain's always trying to achieve homeostasis. It's basically trying to stay in balance. And I basically chemically was throwing my brain out of balance all the time, suppressing it, and therefore your brain throws out all these excitatory neurotransmitters trying to like turn it back on. And that's what creates that feeling after the fact, that anxiety that we get, right? And if you drink that much on a daily basis, you're basically caught in a cycle. You're caught in this loop where you've got this rebound anxiety, and the only thing that you can think to get rid of that feeling is to drink, right? So
Yes.
I never understood, I never had gone into that neurochemistry and understood it, never understood that this story that I was telling myself that I needed to drink to relax and unwind was actually not true, that I was actually causing a lot of my own anxiety and stress by my drinking
Yeah.
because of just the chemistry of it.
So it's like you got this knowledge of what's going
Yeah.
on in your brain when you're in this cycle. And then you also became aware of just these beliefs that were driving the behavior. And I think that's so helpful even for people on the Sinclair method, because I'll see them, follow the protocol. They'll follow the
Yeah.
protocol, they'll take the medication, but then they're still drinking habitually every day. And when we talk about it, often they're like, well, I can't imagine an alcohol-free day, or I can't imagine not having that bottle of wine. It's like my best friend at the end of the day. And so I think that like questioning your beliefs or understanding your beliefs, that work is so vital to overcoming alcohol use disorder. So could you talk a little bit about
Yeah.
your process with that and helping
Yeah.
people and even yourself uncovering those beliefs and kind of the
Yeah.
benefits of that?
Yeah, I think you and I've had that conversation before. I think that Sinclair method, I mean, I think that the thought work is equally as important as taking the medication. And the thought work is really, for me, all about uncovering. I call them in my work, I call them alcohol, the ACBs instead of your ABCs. I call them alcohol core beliefs. They're these beliefs that we carry around that sometimes they're unconscious. We don't think about it anymore because we've just held on to them for so long. Like mine, like I need to drink. I literally, it wasn't I want to drink, it was I need to drink. That's how I thought, right? And when you think that way, it drives the desire. Thoughts create feelings. That's how I talk with people all the time. Your thoughts create your feelings. So if you are thinking, I need, well, guess what? You're going to feel a lot of desire. And so we have to change that thought. The first step was like me realizing like that thought came through very clear, like I need a beer. I remembered it. I was like, after I'd first started doing this work and I was at work, I used to have a long commute home and it was a long day. It was like in Oregon, winter, dark, rainy, got in the car. And like my first thought was, I need a beer. And I caught myself in that moment and was like, oh, wow. Like there, I could feel it. Like I said, I need a beer. And immediately I like want, like I could feel the desire. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. Like I, my literal thought was, I need. Well, I don't need one. I want one. There's a difference between needing and wanting. But my brain is telling, like my story around this is that I need it. First things first, I got to change that. I got to stop saying I need and say I want. So we can at least like temper down that, right? Then we got to move ourselves from I want to realizing like I don't actually want the beer. I want to relax. Like that's what I really want. I don't want the beer. I want what I think the beer is going to get me. And so it's really, and that's how I work with people. We got to uncover, and for everybody, it's different, right? Some people, the alcohol core belief is it's how I have fun, right? It's my prize, it's my reward, it's I get to. For some people, it's like I can't sleep without it. That's another narrative that we have to change. And so it's understanding and finding for each person. And it isn't like even having one alcohol core belief, you probably have more than one. And so we have to like understand and determine like, oh, okay, so these are all thoughts that I have to figure out a different, I have to challenge it. I have to be willing to say, like that example I just gave you, like you have to be willing in the moment to say, oh, wait a second, that's not true. I don't need this. I want it. And then the next thing is like, then you have to be able to challenge the I want a beer to like, no, I don't want a beer. What I want is to relax. And so and it does require, I tell people all the time, it requires attention, it requires intention to change it, right? That's not a bad thing. Does it feel like it's work in the beginning? Yes, because we are used to running on default and the brain loves to conserve energy. It loves to not have to think about things very hard. And if we've trained it to equate alcohol with relaxation or with reward or with fun, it's not going to want to change that very easily because it's designed to keep us in those habits that it feels like are going to, you motivational triad, like it's going to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and do it as efficiently as possible. That's what the lower brain is doing. And, you know, that's, yeah, sorry, that was a
No,
lot.
No, I mean, I have like 12 questions for you because you just hit on so many different things.
I know. Well,
It
I
was
talk a
so
lot.
good. No, it was really, really good. I mean, first of all, you talked about being kind of in default mode, which I say that a lot because I feel like our alcohol use disorder operates on an unconscious level. And when we're not thinking critically about it, it's just going to continue operating for a lot of people. And you also talked about kind of, you went from I need a beer to I want a beer to actually I really want to relax, and uncovering that need that you have that you're currently turning to alcohol to meet. And that's something I encourage a lot of people to do as well, because I know for me, it just helped me to understand, like, why do I have this urge to drink right now? And like you, there was like always something deeper underneath it. And just getting that insight into like, actually, I just want to escape because I had a really stressful week and I want to turn off my brain. I'm like, okay, there's other ways to quote unquote escape. And one way I did, I was like, I turned on a movie, got some junk food, and just vegged out on my couch. And that was like
Great.
a method to have an alcohol-free day for me on the Sinclair method, I remember. But it becomes so important to do what you're talking about, kind of identifying that need that's driving the urge to drink. Because if we don't do that, like you said, we're just operating in that default pattern that we've been in for so long. And you said something about a motivational triad. Like, tell us more about that because that's really interesting.
So the brain, and I talk about the brain being, kind of, I mean, first of all, I talk about our beautiful, brilliant human brains all the time. That's the way I like to describe them. Our brains are amazing. Like they are incredible. And the amount that we actually know about the brain is still so small compared to how vast and capable our brains are. And it's really good news for all of us because it means that it doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter how long you've been doing what you're doing, you have the capacity to change. Our brains are literally wired to be able to change. And the brain typically, I mean, the human brain evolved to include this beautiful, logical, big brain part, the prefrontal cortex. And it's a part that we have that the mammals don't have, right? The mammals have that lower brain response mechanism, which is the response that is more ingrained in terms of those emotional kind of primal responses. So we think about like, our fear response, things like that, right? So the motivational triad is really seated down in that lower brain. And it really is our what we would call our survival brain, or the part of us that cares only about our survival. And that part of the brain is focused on three things. It's focused on seeking pleasure, avoiding pain, and doing it as efficiently as possible. And the lower brain, I like to think of it this way for people, and I explain this to people, that lower brain does not have the capacity to worry about the future. That's the higher brain's job. That's our logical prefrontal cortex. It's the part of the brain that evolved last for humans. And it's what makes us uniquely human. Animals don't think about the future. They cannot. They don't perceive that. We do. And so when we tap into that, we have to tap into that part that makes us human, that logical prefrontal cortex, to override that lower primal survival motivational triad piece of our brain. And that's what the default, when we think about default, that's coming from that lower brain that doesn't have the capacity to worry about the future.
Yes. And that makes just so much sense. And I often talk about like when we develop an alcohol use disorder on some kind of unconscious level, we're mistakenly equating it to a survival need. That's that primitive
Yeah.
kind of urge that comes up. And that's why people will sacrifice their health, their family, their jobs, their relationships just to keep on drinking. And that logical part of our brain, the real us that can think
Yeah.
about the future is like, why am I doing this? Why am I sabotaging my life? And I tell people that's the real you. That's the real you that wants to get this issue under control. But the other part of your brain is just kind of learned this behavior because it's so pleasurable and rewarding. And to your point, what you said earlier, we love to learn new habits and make them default just to save energy in the brain.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, it's, we can't get mad at our brains for operating this way, right? Like it's an important piece of who we are to have those default survival instincts. It's just that we have now, and yes, alcohol impacts are, it's a concentrated reward. The humans figured out how to, before we ever distilled liquor or figured out how to make alcohol, berries were fermenting and things were, and those things, and animals would find them and eat them because they would get that same kind of, dopamine hit that a fermented uh, substance gives. But we as humans figured out how to make that, we industrialized it. We figured out how to really distill alcohol to make it very concentrated. And so it's it's understandable that our brain has gotten kind of hijacked by that. And so, but it also is, should provide, like I said, should provide some hope and relief to know that there's another part of our brain that's also there that is able to help us overcome that lower reward system. And that and I will say, Katie, the one thing that I am that maybe delineates you and I in terms of who we work with is I would say that I tend to work with people who have mild to moderate alcohol use disorder and not necessarily severe alcohol use disorder, where people are experiencing the physical side effects of withdrawal or anything like that. And so just to clarify from my perspective and the people that I work with.
Yeah. Okay. I'm curious to ask, I'm just thinking of like several people I'm currently working with who have had success and progress with the Sinclair method, but they're still stuck in habitual patterns. For example, they fear an alcohol-free day, or maybe they just don't feel comfortable because they've been in this comfortable with the idea of an alcohol-free day because they've been in a pattern of drinking daily for years or decades. And it's kind of become this comfort blanket for them. I see this regularly with daily drinkers on the Sinclair method. And of course, it's a process. But sometimes I think, and I know I experience this, like my motivation to change would wax and wane on TSM. And I always tell people, like, because the Sinclair method is a long-term treatment, like that's probably going to happen. It's not like we're going to be super motivated to make all these changes for the duration of the treatment, like a year or something. So I find, and I really want to hear your thoughts on this, like we need to have some level of motivation to be willing to do this work that you are talking about, to really sit with our thoughts, question them, become curious about them, challenge them, all of that. How important is personal motivation to changing one's relationship with alcohol, whether through TSM or through the techniques that you teach? And how do you kind of hold people's hands or work with them throughout that, if their motivation fades and a part of them really does want to change, but they're kind of like, oh, like this is just a lot of work. I'm tired kind of thing.
Right. Well, first of all, so the feeling of motivation, right? The feeling of motivation in my work comes from your thoughts, right? So we always have, like, it's always being driven by what we're thinking about. So when we focus our thoughts on like, oh, this is just taking so long. Oh, I feel tired. Right. Well, you when you think like that, of course, you're going to feel less motivated. Right. So it's like, it's this cycle that happens with people. But I think for the long haul, right? Because really, you and I both are trying to help people create a relationship with alcohol that they want to sustain for the rest of their lives. And so that's something that I really that I really want people to understand. Like the work that I talk about doing, like it is something that you have to want to do for the rest of your life. But that isn't a bad thing. If you choose to look at it in one, if you choose to frame it in the right direction, you will get to a point. If you're always thinking about it like, I just have to stop drinking or I have to just give this up, and you're really putting it into a lifestyle that sounds really miserable, then of course it's going to, right? How are you going to stay motivated? Instead, we want to figure out, like, I am becoming someone, like the way that I thought about it all the time was like my, I don't know if you want to say a mantra or whatever, the thought that worked for me was, I'm becoming someone who desires alcohol less. I am becoming someone who desires alcohol less, which when I kept saying that to myself and I kept practicing that and I kept focusing my attention, it kept me and helped me stay motivated. Now, again, I am a huge proponent of small steps, not trying to take giant leaps, right? Meeting ourselves where we're at and then just looking for that one opportunity, right? So in the beginning, I didn't feel like an alcohol free day was doable for me for quite a while. I tried to just reduce. Now, I have to say that in this world of so many options for non-alcoholic beverages these days and mocktails, there's so many great alternatives. And so it's like, okay, so I would just plan for, like, I'm going to plan for, you know, in the beginning, it was literally like, I'm going to plan for 3 drinks, not 4. And instead, I'm going to have, this for the last drink of the day, or I'm not going to have the first drink. I'm going to have a non-alcoholic beer as opposed to a regular beer. Like I, I tried to set myself, and I say it all the time with my people, like, we're going to set ourselves up for success, right? That's the goal. I want people to feel like 80 to 90% sure that they're going to be able to hit the plan. Then as we get confidence, like, oh, okay, I can make a plan and I can be successful with this, then we're going to look for one area, one small day, not the whole week. We're not going to say, okay, we're going to reduce by, 1 drink every day. We're going to like say, okay, let's take 2 days of this week and like see if we can reduce that 4 down to 3. Can we reduce that 3 down to 2? Then after we do that for a few weeks, then it's like, okay, you know what? What's one day that I am willing to try to make this alcohol free? Like, I'm going to incorporate one alcohol free day. And we look at it as like again, a practice. Like, I am becoming someone who desires alcohol less. And this is an important step for me. This is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to be alcohol free. I'm going to set myself up for success. I'm going to have lots of non alcoholic beverages. I'm going to figure out what I'm going to binge on TV. I'm going to have my best snacks. I mean, it's like, and that's okay. Like, that's totally doable and okay. And people shouldn't feel any shame around that. That should be like, way to go. Like, you are creating a new strategy for how you're going to relax and unwind and how you're going to, because life's going to keep happening. So you got to figure out how to be a better thinker and better and a new coping strategy, because clearly by the time people are working with you and me, they understand that their relationship with alcohol is not working for them anymore, right?
Yeah.
It's not providing it may provide a temporary sense of relief, but it's certainly not working for them on a global perspective. They wouldn't, so
Yeah. I love that you mentioned mantras, because in Thrive's program, we have like a whole list of them for the different kind of goals people have. And I find it to be so important. I know it was for me on the Sinclair method, because it was so easy to fall into like stinking thinking or just like feel
yeah.
discouraged because it's work and it's not always successful. And a lot of emotions are surfacing and we're learning to cope in other ways and we're not numbing out as much. And so I just found that to be very helpful as well. And so for anybody watching, like, I would recommend that mantra you used or another one that resonates with you, so that you're, especially when you get in those like spirals where your thoughts are just going negative and you want to beat yourself up or feel discouraged, just to anchor into that, because it can just refocus your mind. And Molly, what you're talking about, I mean, it sounds like with your work, it all starts with the thoughts. Would you say that that's true?
Absolutely, 100%. You said something about there, the spiral. I often tell people, I literally tell people, we're going to imagine a stop. I imagine a stop sign. I like literally like stop. Like, this is not helpful. And when we find thoughts that are not helpful, we have to be willing to sink into and feel like, understand what feeling we're feeling in the first place, articulate that, and then go, okay, why am I feeling this? What am I thinking right now that's causing this? But yes, without question, the thoughts are what drives, because it's the thoughts that we have that drive the feeling that create the, the whether it's the thoughts that are like, I need to drink to relax and unwind, they all fuel the feeling of desire. And when we create that feeling of desire, and when we're pushing on that feeling of desire so hard, it's a really big ask to try to change the actual action of drinking when all we feel is this really strong desire to drink, right? So we have to go backwards and change how we think to change how we feel so that we can take better actions and get better results.
I just kind of had a light bulb moment when you were talking because I think before I did the Sinclair method and I was trying to moderate on my own, I wasn't thinking about the thoughts, but I was thinking about I just want to get rid of the desire to drink. Like I was trying to like, how do
Right.
I like distract myself from this feeling or this urge that I have to drink? But that's not getting to the root of the issue, which is these, I guess you could say they're like thought habits, just like we have behavioral
Right.
habits, we have these thought habits, especially if we've been
Right.
drinking for so long. It's like this situation leads to this thought, this feeling leads to this thought. So it's like
Right.
changing our thought habits. Would you say that?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I think that people, just like anything else with default, we get into, I tell people all the time, I was like a huge know-it-all with myself. Like, and I would have told you, like, reported to you, like, well, obviously I'm stressed and overwhelmed. Like, look at my life. I have 4 kids. I'm working, like there was, the way that I looked at it was like there was no question about whether or not my life was stressful.
Yeah.
I would have told you that that's like I would have expected you to just, you know, accept that at face value. Like that wasn't a subjective idea to me. That was
Yeah.
just me reporting the facts. When I realized, when I got trained or learned this model and realized, like, oh, you know what? There's actually somebody that could have this entire life the way that you have it, and they don't see it as stressful. They actually see it as happy, as fun, as energetic. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. So you mean that I'm the one that's creating the feeling of stress, all because of how that all the sentences in my brain that I have about my life. And when I figured that out, I mean, that's when and I tell people all the time, what I talk about is a meta skill. It's not just about alcohol, because it really can change everything in your life. And it does change everything, because for me, once I understood that it was me, that it was my agency to create the story, the narrative of my life, and the only person that was going to describe it was me in my own brain, and that's how I felt about things, like that's how the feelings were. It wasn't that the circumstances of my life that caused the feelings. It was how I thought about the circumstances that caused my feelings.
Wow, that is so powerful. And what you're describing, like, I think it takes courage to face that fact about us because, especially with alcohol use disorder, for me at least, it just robbed me of my confidence, my belief in myself, my trust in myself, my integrity. And I feel like it was the default to fall into these negative thinking patterns and almost fall into victim mode, I guess you could say, is one way to describe what you're saying. How do you work with people if they're in that victim mode of like, well, I have kids, I have stress, like I need alcohol? How do you gently pull them out of that without like being
Right.
mean, for lack of a
I
better word,
know.
or like,
I feel I no, I totally agree with you. It's a very fine line, because I mean, the thing of it is like I get it, because for so long I was stuck in that very mode. But I also, once I figured it out, like I got kind of um like did not want to give my power away to anyone or anything else, how I was going to feel about my life. Like I wasn't willing to outsource that to anybody. And that means like people, things, substances, whatever, right? I was like, okay, you know what? I mean, screw this. If I have this one life to live, I am not going to waste my days feeling like like that life is hard, that life's crappy. And that isn't to say that it's like that it's Pollyanna and like there's never a difficult moment. But I want to start thinking that like life is hard. Sometimes life is hard. I don't need to add to my own suffering by telling me myself how terrible things are, right? I instead want to like say to myself, like, yeah, things are hard and I can do hard things. Like I've done lots of hard things in my life. And I just need to, like, this is just a season of life. what I mean, and also probably like learning and accepting and realizing that life is going to be 50-50. Like it's going to be 50% great and 50% crap. And I just have to like stop thinking that I don't ever deserve any crap in my life and realize that everybody does. Like everybody gets it. So I might as well just like live with that, and at the end of the day, like we all are going to cope with stuff and we're all going to have stuff that we have to deal with. We just need to figure out the ways of coping that actually don't make our lives worse. And turning to alcohol to try to cope with with the 50% that's crap, is not a sustainable coping strategy, because it is going to only make things worse.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And it's just, the cliche that's coming to my mind is like, as we heal from alcohol use disorder and it's no longer a crutch, we just become more resilient. And I tell people that no alcohol buzz is better than me knowing that life is going to throw whatever it is at me. And I know I can get through it without needing to numb out and escape. Like I used to almost, in a very weird way, look forward to challenges in life because I'd be like, cool, I have an excuse to go get a bottle of whiskey and numb out,
Right,
which is like
right.
sad to look back on. But to be resilient and know that like whatever the day brings, I'm going to be able to get through it because I've, have healthy coping skills. I trust myself again. That's just an incredible feeling, in my experience, better than any buzz that alcohol could provide.
Oh yeah. I mean, I tell people about in early 2019, February 2019, I had to put our dog to sleep. And it was the first time I'd ever had to do that. And I literally, did that and then went to the store and got a big box of hot tamales and a 6 pack of IPAs. That was my coping strategy, right? Fast forward to 2022, the end of 2022, and my dad passed away unexpectedly at my house right after on Thanksgiving night. And it was traumatic and it was, just, I mean, my dad was my guiding light in my life. So it was, hard in all the ways that a parent's loss can be hard. And and I didn't have the same desire to go try to get away from it, right? Like I just experienced the grief and I experienced the whole thing, and I was really really gratified to like say like I can handle this big emotion. Like I can do this. Did I cry? Yes. Did I feel terrible? Did it hurt physically? Yes. And I could do it. Right. And so that's, yeah, I say it all 100% when I talk with people in my program. It's all about becoming, I say, a better thinker, but it is becoming more emotionally resilient
Yeah.
over time and learning how to handle big emotion, how to manage our thoughts on a daily basis. And yeah, and then not and figuring out other coping strategies.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a Brene Brown quote. I'm going to butcher it. Maybe you've heard of it, but she basically says like you can't selectively numb emotions. Like when you numb the bad ones, you're also numbing the good ones. And I think that's just a beautiful part of healing and no longer numbing out on alcohol, is that you get the spectrum of emotions. You feel things fully, and that's just part of the human experience. Even walking through grief, like we're refined in that process. We learn a lot about ourselves, and it's just, yeah, it's a beautiful part of the human experience to feel the whole spectrum of emotions, I find.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yes. Anyways, we have to eh, be willing, right,
Yeah.
to live the whole human experience and understand that, like I said, that it's 50% of it's going to be great and 50% of it's going to suck, and
Yeah.
we're going to have to just accept that, and have faith that in those valleys that there's lighter days coming, and also realize that in those really wonderful moments that they're not going to last forever, and that's okay. Like
Yeah.
that's okay, we're going to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say too, like as we kind of wrap up, like the things you're talking about in teaching, this is not just like woo-woo affirmations, like repeat it and you'll believe it kind of nonsense. Like this is grounded in neuroscience. Like you going from your dog dying to your dad dying, that 3-year span, like your brain had changed fundamentally. You had retrained it to think differently, to view alcohol differently. So can you maybe just touch on that a bit, like why this isn't just like affirmations that are like woo woo? It's really grounded in neuroscience.
Yeah, neuroplasticity is real. And that is what the brain is, our human brain, which is what makes it so incredible because it is literally designed to rewire itself. Over on my podcast, I interviewed, and now I'm gonna butcher it, so never mind. Well, I can't remember off the top of my head. Oh, all right. Anyways, I can't remember her name, which is really just disappointing in this moment, but she's a stroke survivor. People will know who she was, a neuroscientist who had a stroke and then literally had to retrain her brain to do everything, right? This is the thing about our brains. They are literally capable of so much. And understanding that is both, like I said, super empowering. And we have to realize that the more ingrained a habit is, it's going to take us some time to, it's a well-worn neural pathway. And it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel hard in the beginning to get the new neural pathway going, but it's 100% possible. And then when you do, that becomes the ingrained neural pathway and the ingrained habit. And then you don't have to you don't it's harder to default back to the other one because that just becomes who you are, right? And I think that's in James Clear's work in Atomic Habits. He talks about identity-based habits, and that's why, like, for me, saying to myself I'm becoming someone who desires alcohol less, like that's the identity I wanted. And I wanted to be someone who truly didn't desire alcohol. I wanted to be someone, now I say I'm an alcohol minimalist. I don't have any concern about how I include alcohol in my life. I don't turn to it to try to numb my emotions. I don't use it as a coping strategy on a daily basis. And I don't believe that I need to drink to have fun or whatever else. If I want to include it in my life, I know I'm going to do it in a minimal way because anything beyond that increases all my risks for all the reasons that, anything that over drinking does. And so it's, it's totally possible.
Yeah.
And neuroplasticity is real.
So just for people who might be wondering, they kind of understood what your drinking was when you started this process. Like right now, just to be clear, you still keep alcohol in your life, but like your podcast is your alcohol minimalist, right? Like
Yeah.
what does that look like, I guess, over the course of a month or a week, if you wouldn't mind sharing?
So no, yeah, low risk limits for women. So, this is from the NIAAA, and so just to be clear, I tell this to people all the time, low risk limits are set by the NIAAA because it's been proven that if you stick to these low risk limits, you have a like 1% chance of developing alcohol use disorder. It has nothing to do with the safety of alcohol because, you know, from a safety perspective, health safety perspective, people can argue that the safest amount is 0, right? It's a known carcinogen. We have to be very clear about all of the reasons. Like I said, it's a risk tolerance kind of decision, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to include it. For low risk limits for the NIAAA are 7 standard drinks or less for women on a weekly basis and no more than 3 standard drinks on any one day. So that's what I stick to. For me, I also include, like I always do, a dry January just because I feel like it's a really good reset. It's a good mindset practice for me. I always want to just remind myself like this is, being alcohol free is completely and possible, and it might be something that I choose to do in the future, right? I don't ever say that I'm never going to be like, I'm always willing to look at. And because those low risk limits are really for women up to the age of 65. And so after that, it becomes even lower. So we have to be willing to like look at things over the course of our lives. for
Yeah.
me right now, this relationship with alcohol works. And that's for women. For men, it's 14 standard drinks. And again, this is US based. So, and it's really geared towards not developing alcohol use disorder. It's in no way saying that this is the healthy or
Yeah.
whatever amount of alcohol.
Yeah. Okay, that's very, very helpful. Thank you for sharing that. And it's like, yeah, I get those comments too, like you shouldn't like promote drinking alcohol, but I'm like, I eat candy that I know is probably carcinogenic with the chemicals in it, but okay, I'm not eating it every day, it's not like I'm binging
We
it.
have to
And
be,
so
it's our risk tolerance,
yeah,
right? I am very clear on the amount of risk that I'm willing to
yeah.
take with regards to alcohol and the amount that I'm not willing to take. And
Yes.
that's what I think people have to, for their own selves,
Yeah.
they have to create that, they have to figure that out for themselves, what they are willing to be tolerant of.
Yeah, because I think with human nature, it's like if someone tells me not to do something, I'm gonna want to do it more. So yeah, moderation, I guess.
Yeah. And I
Molly,
think,
oh, go ahead.
yeah, no, no, no. I was going to say, you said something about earlier, you said like, the buzz, right?
Yeah.
I think it's really important with regards to alcohol. Like I'm again, very science forward over on my stuff. I to really talk about, again, keeping that blood alcohol content too, down to a lower level, because it's when we start chasing that buzz and raising that blood alcohol content that it becomes really hard to try to manage our thoughts, right? Your higher brain kind of turns off. So there's never really a time in my life where I am chasing that buzz anymore. If I'm going to include alcohol, it's really just it's that, quote unquote therapeutic level of 0 to 0.055% blood alcohol content.
Okay. Interesting. And that just like popped another question in my head, if you don't
Sorry.
mind. No, it was very, very important because that's a habit that I think people struggle to break again, even on Naltrexone, where it's like they want to chase that buzz or they're looking for that feeling, or people say, what's the point in drinking if you're not getting the buzz?
Right.
So it was that part of you kind of training your brain and your thoughts and beliefs around alcohol. And then now that you are drinking at such a low level, do you still reap benefits from alcohol? I mean, obviously you probably
I
wouldn't do it if
still,
you didn't.
I mean, I enjoy, so I personally enjoy the taste of the alcohol that I drink. And I mean, if it's always, I tell people it's like your own personal little petri dish, because every time you drink, like it's the variables, how much you've eaten, how much you've slept, how much et cetera. Those all come into bear. So you have to pay attention. But I would say that without question, I can have a drink and I definitely feel that very slight, just,
Yeah.
the slight relaxing, euphoric feeling that's associated with raising your blood alcohol content from 0 to 0.055%.
Yeah.
The deal is that if we chase that, we want to keep feeling that, it won't, it will raise our blood alcohol content up to 0.08%, which is really, considered legally intoxicated in most states. And that's where really the negative consequences start to compound. And so it's this cycle. And again, I mean, I don't have that kind of conversation with myself in the midst of it, like, oh, you don't want to raise your blood. But I mean, I'm very aware of the fact that, and again, because I did it, like I know that if I keep drinking, the outcome's not going to be good. And
Yeah.
I would say that even nowadays, every now and then I will have a night where I decide to drink a third drink, and it disrupts my sleep. The next day I
Yeah.
can feel it. It's like I'm very conscious of it because yeah, I mean, I think I'm just in tune with how it feels in my body.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very helpful. Yeah. And my husband, he drinks like that. I've never seen him drunk. He never has more than like two, maybe three drinks, like here and there. And he was something I like modeled after when I was changing my
Right.
own drinking. Cause I'm like, it's possible to drink like a normal person and not get drunk and not drink, most of the days and things like that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, this has been so helpful, Molly. Like I'm going to rewatch this because I learned so much from you.
Jeez.
Your work is so important. Like it really, really is, because it's empowering people to take back their control over alcohol, and they're not a victim and stuck where they're at. And you're an example of that. And I know you work with people. So how can people find you? What's your podcast? What's your book? Tell us about your program.
Well, you can go to www.mollywatts.com to learn about me, my book, the podcast, my programs. And I have a big Facebook group like yours over on the Alcohol Minimalist Facebook group. So it's a great place too. And really, I just encourage people to, and obviously, Katie, you and I mean, I think we talk the same language, we work in the same ways. And sometimes for people who, they need both of us, they need us all, in terms of that conversation. And I never tell people, like, if naltrexone is the way they want to go, then that's great. And for me, that wasn't the path that I chose, but that doesn't mean it's not the right path, right? And so I think it's just having these options for people, having some hope out there and some realization that it isn't necessarily black and white. People do and are, I don't want to ever say normal drinkers, but I want to say that I have a peaceful relationship with alcohol. And I know how I want to include it in my life. And I'm totally capable of doing it. And so is anyone else.
Yeah. Incredible. Well, thank you so much, Molly, for your time. Really great to chat with you. And thanks everybody for watching. I'll link your website below in the description. Perfect. For people.
Thanks, Katie.
All right. Thanks, Molly. Talk with you later.
All right.
Bye.
See ya.